Morning everybody, 27 October, Southern Colorado, where we've had a whole lot of trailing that went through yesterday all the way from here back across Utah, Nevada, Arizona, into California. It is this impulse which will create the gyre, G-Y-R-E. It is a gyre. It will be the symbiosis between this energy, this cold, dry Pacific energy that will merge with Hurricane Sandy. And they've been profoundly engineering this. Here's a trail, here's a cross trail, breaking it in half, and then just some cirrus kind of weeping out as the cold air is now up to the north, racing east. We had some temperatures in far northwestern Canada, the Northwest Territories, that were 11 below zero this morning, and widespread stretches of Alaska are in the single digits above 2 below zero. This is what's kind of weird, and I just don't know how this is going to translate to video. But these little fragments of clouds, and they're not cirrus, they're not cumulus, but they're bloody low. They are low clouds. You know, they're probably sub 15,000 feet, and there's just nothing in the books that would describe what type of clouds these are. And this is the issue with geoengineering, is that we are forcing the atmosphere to do things that it has never done before. And the clouds are the biggest, how do I want to say, the signpost to show you that things are not right. It's because the clouds are in the not the right shape, they're not at the right altitudes, they're not in the typical formations. We'll do a little satellite discussion, and from what I was seeing last night, it was looking like Sandy was going to be pulled back inland, not necessarily through New England, but across Pennsylvania. The next model run is in process now, and that'll give us a little bit of clue as to where Sandy will make landfall and then loiter over the hills, the deciduous tree-rich areas of Pennsylvania or New York State, where there's still a lot of trees, a lot of leaves on the trees, which could spell a lot of damage, a lot of downed trees. Preparation is the key. Preparation is the key word now, folks. You got to get on this, and you got to get on it hard. All right, everybody. Looking up. I'm on the southeast side of this cold polar jet that's pouring into the eastern U.S. And we're getting trails. Lots of trails. Well, I shouldn't say lots, because I've seen lots, and this isn't lots. But what I am seeing is that they're very interested on the southern extent of this polar push of air that will turn Sandy into something else. And so we've had a stripe come along through here. This one was the one that sparked me to get back outside and have a look. I got outside and we've just had this crossflight that was interested in this little segment of a trail. This is a prime example of why the trails are important to these people. A little bit fluoresces, a little bit remains in existence, and another plane comes along and investigates or marks off that spot. The thing is, they knew this segment was going to persist, and they knew that this plane needed to come along and hit it. So, you know, there's nothing haphazard. I don't know how many hundreds of times I've said that, but that's just the way it is. This is an incredible game of precision, of ballet, of exactness in the sky. So they know that we have a hurricane. They know Sandy is going extratropical. They know. And they have a fleet of planes that numbers likely globally in the thousands to deal with this. So this is like a drape being dragged across a floor. And you can see how it's curling. It's being pushed aggressively to the south or to the right side of the screen. And then the powders are trailing off this way, to the left, to the north. And I'm certain you'll have, there was the one earlier, another one, there'll probably be one to come along. But I am truly just on the edge of this pouring of cold air that will explode, or what we call in meteorology, bomb out Sandy. Here's another trail. So this is of keen importance, is how far south they allow this cold air to go, this aspect of the jet stream. Because the farther south it is, the deeper the bowl, or the deeper they'll carve out the jet stream from underneath Sandy. The farther south this goes, the farther south Sandy will come ashore. All right, here's the other earlier tick. And here comes another one. Again, off to the south. Off to the south. These are not necessarily persisting trails, but they don't have to. They don't have to. These planes are doing what they need to do, and each one has its own payload of technologies, of markingness, and they're working. All right, we'll see how this evolves here in the next few minutes. Here's another very low trail. Very low trail. It was fun. This one was absolutely sub 18,000 feet. And a descending motion. As you can see, the powders, the aerosols, the powders, because they're not really aerosols. They're physical particles that have been aerosolized, but they're physical. They're solid, but they are in a descending mode or descending air. So they're in a downward motion. There's another fat trail back here behind the cloud, and I'll see if I can't get to that. And it's this plane here, this chemtrail plane, that's interested in this other trail, and I'll get out of the way, or I'll get out of the way of the trees to go see it. So here's this plane. I'll zoom out. It's all debris from an earlier trail, and here's the new one coming. And what's fascinating with this new one is how rapidly the base of it has been the formation of this new cloud. You can see how the powders are disturbed from this point back and not dripping out so much, and then dripping out far more right there. And we still have this guy here. What they do, they lay out the trails, and then the clouds form. The clouds form. Let's see how this thing has evolved in the last 2-3 minutes. A couple of waves forming here. We're going to peek off to the south through the trees. And something very similar is happening down here as well. This arcing formation, standing wave that the clouds must crest before they show up on the other side. Same thing is happening with this. The trail being the mark to signify where this is happening. And it all can be observed from space. Schriever Air Force Base and Honeywell. The two together have this constellation of satellites where this can be seen and observed. I'm going to swing around to the north. Another cloud here. Another chemtrail off to the top of it. Chemtrail precisely to the top of the cloud. And if they're concerned about this, and we have seen undoubtedly thousands of chemtrails in and around Sandy, they are keenly aware of where she is going and headed and the exact strength of that storm. Sandy does not have to make landfall. They could have put up a trough in the west, and that would have driven Sandy or let Sandy continue out to sea rather than creating this two-storm gyre, which would enlarge Sandy and folded her back and onshore with a retrograde motion. She could have stayed at sea and nothing would have happened except some rain on the southeastern coastal areas. That could have happened, but it didn't happen because they want a disaster for some reason that probably will not become apparent until days, if not weeks afterwards. So we just finished that and swung around to the west, and now we've got another investigative flight. We'll see if his trail goes marking or permanent once it hits this other one just crossing the mountains right now. That'll be interesting. Yep. This trail is starting to stick. There's that trail. It's just the two points, the two engines. No full wingspan. Nothing out of the tail cone, at least that I've seen yet, out of the auxiliary power unit. Now we can hear the audio from it. I'm zoomed in all the way. The question is, are there passengers on board? Are there actually people on board, or is this entirely robotic? with artificial intelligence doing the whole thing. And then we can see, here's the old trail. And it's, maybe this is the target. This leading edge of this particular cloud. We'll zoom in, see if he's above it. Well, there's the shadow. So he's pretty much at cloud height. Pretty much right at cloud height. As he treks off to the east. He's at cloud height. I'm sure there'll be many more through the afternoon, as it is this part of the storm that is crucial to where Sandy makes landfall. Coming back outside after an hour break, lots of different cloud types have rolled through here over the last hour, and I just haven't been able to get out there and grab them all. I have remnants of a trail here that's rather low, and a more faint one up in this direction. And then as we look southbound, still more this mottled look, but there's still the residuals of a trail there. But what is kind of fascinating is what's happening beyond this tree. And just all of this curlingness, this business. This is odd. This is odd, especially when the jet stream is supposed to be moving so quickly, so fast. These clouds should be streamlined and rather smooth, and without a whole lot of, how do I want to say it, directional texture would be the word I would use. It just tells me that so often these days, clouds are not flying with the wind. They are attached to some other energy. Come off to the south. The chemtrail showing up, coming out of these clouds, out of this lenticular-like formation that is over the southern end of the Sangres. Here's one low and slow. U.S. Air. Working, wonder if he'll turn on the mixture as he flies into what was an older trail that is nearly faded out. Low and slow. Our eastern skies have cleared up. That was a bad zoom, wasn't it now? But our eastern skies have cleared up. All that business is gone. And it's moved to the west. It's moved to the west. So now out here, we have a renewed interest in what's happening west of here. And on satellite, and I'll show you here this in just a little bit, there's an intense amount of new trailing off the Pacific Northwest coast. And in developing that ridge of high pressure, which is what looks like it happens, it strengthens the long wave trough that will be established over the eastern U.S. And then, more importantly, there's a massive ridge sitting out over the mid-Atlantic, or actually not even the mid-Atlantic, but the western Atlantic. And that ridge in the western Atlantic will keep Sandy and that whole storm from progressing eastbound. It blocks its movement. And in blocking the movement of Sandy, then we see the monumental rains that everybody is afraid of. So by establishing these ridges of high pressure, you constrain the movement of the lows. And if you have a low pressure that you're exceedingly interested in maintaining integrity or maintaining its location, you have to block it in. And they do that by building high pressures. That's what's happening off the western part of the U.S. It's what's happening out into the western Atlantic. And in doing so, you block in the ability of Sandy to progress out into the open ocean. And so what is happening in the western U.S. plays directly into what happens with Sandy, and then of course along the wave train off to the east. And so this big old fatty crossed this other trail, and I suppose in time, when we see the two trails deform, it'll be apparent as to why, but it isn't immediately right now. So that plane we were watching just come over the horizon. Just left this pup. Part of it stayed. We were interested in how it was going to cross this other trail here, right here, on the bottom. and I didn't really see any interaction. My angle's a little too oblique to really pick it out, other than the trail here ends, and it was a faint cloud, probably a remnant of an earlier trail right there. But then he did leave a smear, and I would bet that it's this little bit right in here that is of keen interest, because otherwise the line would have come along straight, but instead it folded over off to this direction. On this side, folded over to this direction. You can see that very clearly. Breaks to the right, breaks to the left. And here's your midpoint. There's your midpoint right there. So I would expect to see, because there are so many other planes in the sky, another one come along and hit this. I'll be on the lookout. Look how blue, how dry, how pristine this air is. And then we get these guys flying through, leaving their powders for us all to breathe. Swinging out to the western horizon where we saw earlier, the planes were picking up in intensity, the trails were becoming of longer duration, and that just continues. One just went right through the middle of this forming cloud, and then continues on. That's what they're doing to the western horizon, almost exactly like what they did yesterday. Continue to engineer the west to pump up the ridge, and downstream, which would be the eastern U.S., develop a trough, and then downstream from that in the western Atlantic, it pumps up a ridge. It's all connected. Notice how I'm in here a little closer at this trail than this one here. As we come in closer, how the powders from this one are up, after this cross flight. After. Come in a little closer and see if we can't make that out. And then once we cross this guy, see how the one running this way does a twist right here. So that's a point. It's a point where there's an energetic difference that somehow, on some small scale, will impact the flow of the jet stream. I want to start with the western U.S. As we look towards Saturday afternoon, ending at about 3 o'clock Mountain Time, where I am, looking out once again at the Pacific, because everything is connected. This is the most important thing, is everything is connected. And once again, littering of chemtrails all through the west. As you dig this trough, which appears that that's what's happening, then this trough is deeper through the entirety of the U.S., and that pumps up a ridge ahead of Sandy, downstream of Sandy, so that when you do that, she has no place to go. And then we see this little thing. You can see some of these trails, these clouds with this right here, moving independent of the rest of the stream of the clouds. Watch once more time. Boom, look at that right through there. And so we have all of these trails digging this trough out west. And I'll show you how that connects to Sandy in just a moment. This picture came in via a reader on Facebook. And you can see all of these lines, all this gridded action as a result of chemtrails in and around the Georgia coastal areas. In fact, in the entirety of the Peach State, dealing with chemtrails today, and that is not unique. That is not unique. We saw the west, we saw those trails out there, and how they're developing the trough in the west to capture. And you can see the trough here. And as this thing digs deeper, the deeper it goes, it begins to undercut here and not push Sandy out of the way, because we've got a blocking ridge. We've got a ridge right in here that is not going to allow Sandy to move inland or move out into the Atlantic, but begin to fold her back into the coastal areas. And so we'll see the trails, first of all, out and through here. Believe it or not, in this easterly tropical flow, there's planes and engineering going on off in this direction. And then at this 8-kilometer resolution, it's kind of tough to pick out the trails here individually, simply because there are so bloody many of them. And this is where the imagery, the visible imagery, is somewhat better for that. We'll come out to the visible imagery, and here's Georgia once again, and see all of the texture crisscrossing Florida, up through Georgia, then into the Carolinas, and then more coastal ribbing as we move through North Carolina, and then it continues into Virginia. So there's really not a location that is spared from this. This is kind of an interesting structure. South of Richmond, some south of D.C. with the thickening trails striped across these openings. But when we step out into the Atlantic, you can see all these holes. And if you've been a watcher of mine and seen some of my videos, then you know how keenly aware I am of these holes and how the weather seems to bend and fold around them. It's like they're bending the ley lines of the atmosphere of the planet so they can shape how the water flows around them. So this is the center of Sandy, and it's not circular. Yes, there are bends in there, but there are these very funky shapes. There are these squarish shapes. And this kind of texture should not happen in what could be best termed as a whirlpool. Here's a nice hole. Here's another nice hole. And then it continues on. These two are related. And so there's all of this geometry embedded within these storms. And they use the straight lines of the chemtrails to keep everything in alignment. And so their resonance geometry can then be morphed to entrain the shape of the hurricane. And it isn't just this hurricane. It is nearly all weather events that can be managed this way. Delaware, across this narrow strip of this small state, all of these trails extending on up into New Jersey. And so the new models are bringing in Sandy not in the Long Island, the Hamptons, Bridgeport, New York City area, but farther south. Not quite as far south as Cape May, although the new guidance that comes in tonight may indeed bring her that far south. But how that happens with this storm is determined out west. The strong squirting jet stream that I have been seeing in the western states. Because I'm here, right at this little notch in the mountains, and I'm looking east, and I've been shooting the chemtrails along this squirt, this shot, a very smooth cloud that originates just west of Fort Collins and along the Front Range, then angling down towards the panhandles of Texas and Oklahoma. This is what I have been observing. I'm going to switch over to another western shot. Come on in. And it's this cloud that is the back edge or a portion of this very strong, powerful southbound jet stream. And it is that is digging out the hole or the future home of Sandy. And what makes this storm so dangerous or such a flooding threat? Let's go to the forecast. Let's go to Tuesday morning, the 30th. And we'll look at the whole northern hemisphere. Come back in, and this is what will eventually be the trough that holds the cold Pacific energy that's coming in now in combination with Sandy. More importantly is this ridge. From the Canadian Maritimes up to not quite to Greenland, but certainly through Baffin Island and then out past Bermuda. It is this ridge that keeps this storm from going. This is almost a Rex block, but it's more like an omega block. The Greek letter omega makes this sort of shape. And when you have the atmosphere in this convoluted, highly meridional flow, things move very slowly. And that ensures that what will remain of Sandy will rain and rain and rain across that part of the country for several days. Here's the visible imagery as we get very close to sunset with Sandy. And we see there's kind of the core. You can still see some convection going on with the tops. They're still billowing up. This is my favorite time to look at the visible imagery. And then as we get to Florida and through Georgia, you can see this top canopy of energy coming out and around. As the storm curls this way, there's still this outbound flow. And then the Arctic air, the colder air, that cold frontal boundary is right in through here. You can see the back edge, the cumulus, beginning to plunge southbound. And then where I am, out west, here's that cold air pouring southbound out of Canada. You can see the tracks in here. You can see these unusual shapes beginning to manifest as the engineering commences. I'd love to see what this looks like from folks northwest of Oklahoma City, coming into Bartlesville, Tulsa. It's past Gage, Well, it isn't quite past gauge, but it is out in that area, and I'd like to see what that looks like from the ground level. But in any case, this is what Sandy looks like in the visible imagery, and there's so many trails, and the clouds are now beginning to thicken around those trails, so we're losing the definition of those trails one by one. Let's come in a little bit closer, get around the College of DuPage's website, looking at the visible imagery as we get closer to sunset. So we've got that low sun angle providing us with a look at the texture in the clouds. And on this edge, we're beginning to see some of the cloud billows, is what they typically like to call them, associated with the outer bands of Sandy. And then we can see the combination of chemtrails and then the cirrus clouds that are a result thereof, and the thousands, utterly thousands, of these chemtrail flights that have been flown around this storm. This is a 6-hour animation associated with Sandy over Georgia. Look at all those trails. Crazy. I'm about right here, the tip of the cursor. These are the song grays that we see, and then the mountains just off to my east, and those are the clouds. Those are the clouds right in here that we're watching the chemtrails fly through in the photography that I took earlier in the day. And you can see this river of air pouring south, focused, and all kinds of texture therein. And all kinds of chemtrails have been interested in this back edge of the storm. So that's what the animation here has looked like today. This is just one of those days where we see these trails and how they smear and spread in the winds as they encounter different turbulences, different wind flows, different resonances. Look at this part. Different shears, different twisting, all kinds of different currents up there. And by running this little line of powder through the sky, reveals, and then it's just gone. And then the trail resumes. Now the powders are going upwards, out of this fresh plain. Oh, Southwest Airlines, what are you doing to our skies? Suppose if this were wartime, and we were seeing these bombers flying overhead, and they had Japanese markings or Russian markings or German markings, we would be in arms, them invading our airspace. But when it's a corporate entity, Southwest, United, US Air, British Airways, Singapore Air, Lufthansa, UPS, FedEx, DHL, British Airways, all of these don't gather a second look. Yet the effects are the same. The effects are the same. They've invaded our airspace. This one off to the west, running a diagonal from this flare. The trail right there, out across, meeting the extent of that flare. He's just passing there on the earlier trail. They love to see where the trails flare and spread out. That's a prime area for marking. Like this spot here, right in the middle, that's a spot. That one there in the middle, that pinch, is a spot that they would be interested in. This one here where it fades, that's a spot they're interested in. This one here where it spreads to the right is a spot they would be interested in. With the counter bulge right here is a spot that they would be interested in. This bright pinch or push to the left or to the south is a spot. And this profound shearing off to the right, to the north. Every one of these is important. And then the trail, there he is, continues off to the east. And no one's the wiser. No one looks twice. No one looks twice. Here's our western sky. Here's our western sky. Look at all this. Look at all this. Something happening there. There's a pinch on either side of that open spot. Texture in here. Our sun, let's see if we can iris down a little bit. Look at all this. This is not condensation. There's something else here. Each one of these little stars or circles off to the edges of trails seems to be of interest to them. In any case, we're just 2 days away from landfall from Sandy. And I'll get this posted up tonight. Alright guys, truly, keep looking up.